The Aztec Empire, one of the most remarkable and sophisticated civilizations in pre-Columbian America, was a force to be reckoned with at the time of its height in the early 16th century. Centered in Tenochtitlan, a city located on an island in Lake Texcoco in present-day Mexico City, the Aztec civilization flourished with impressive achievements in art, science, and military organization. The Aztec people were formidable warriors and had a complex social structure, with a rich cultural tradition that included elaborate rituals, impressive temples, and a deep belief in the gods' influence on the world. The empire itself was a network of city-states ruled by a powerful emperor, or Huey T. Latiny, with Moctezuma II being one of the most famous emperors at the time of the Spanish conquest. Under Moctezuma's rule, the Aztec Empire expanded significantly, creating a vast and prosperous domain that stretched across much of modern-day Mexico. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, was a marvel of engineering and urban planning. The city was built on an island and was connected to the mainland by a series of causeways and canals. The streets were lined with temples, markets, and palaces, and the Aztecs had a robust trade network that extended throughout Mesoamerica. The Aztecs practiced a form of agricultural ingenuity known as chinempas, which involved constructing man-made floating islands to grow crops, providing the city with a steady supply of food. But as great as the Aztec Empire was, it was also an empire built on conquest, tribute, and power. The Aztecs had a reputation for their brutal military campaigns and the demand for tribute from neighboring peoples. While this system enabled them to build their empire, it also sowed the seeds of resentment among the peoples they ruled. This resentment would become a crucial factor in the events leading to the downfall of the Aztec Empire. The Aztecs also had an intricate belief system, centered around the worship of numerous gods. The most important deity was Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, and the Aztecs believed that the world was in constant need of nourishment through sacrifice. Human sacrifice, often in the form of prisoners of war, was a central practice in their religious rituals. These sacrifices were made atop the Templo Mayor, the grand temple in Tenochtitlan, where the hearts of the victims were offered to the gods to ensure the survival of the world. By the time of Moctezuma II's reign, the Aztec Empire was at its peak in terms of power, wealth, and influence. Yet, this very prosperity and militarism which had made the empire so strong would also lead to its undoing when a new force entered the picture: the Spanish. In 1519, a force that would forever change the course of history arrived on the shores of the Aztec Empire. Led by the ambitious Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés, a small group of Spanish soldiers, accompanied by indigenous allies, landed on the coast of what is now Mexico. They came not just as conquerors, but as men driven by the promise of wealth and glory in the New World. Their arrival would trigger a series of events that would culminate in the destruction of the mighty Aztec Empire. At the time of Cortés' arrival, Moctezuma II ruled over a vast and powerful empire, yet the Aztecs had no knowledge of the Spanish or the advanced weaponry and tactics they would bring. Cortés, having already established a foothold in the Caribbean, took advantage of his encounter with Moctezuma and the opportunities presented by the complex political landscape of the region. The Aztecs, with their vast tributary empire, had numerous enemies, and Cortés cleverly forged alliances with these disgruntled peoples, including the Tlaxcalans, who had long been oppressed by the Aztecs. Cortés was a skilled manipulator. His initial arrival in Tenochtitlan was met with awe and curiosity. The Aztecs, already steeped in their own religious prophecies, had recently heard of an ancient prophecy foretelling the return of a god who would bring change. When Cortés arrived with his horses, armor, and weapons, many Aztecs believed that he and his men might be the fulfillment of this prophecy. Moctezuma II, ever cautious but intrigued, welcomed Cortés into the city, offering him gifts and even treating him as a guest of honor. This diplomatic exchange, however, would prove to be disastrous for the Aztec Empire. Cortés, using his superior tactics, quickly took control of the situation. While Moctezuma initially sought to maintain peace, his leadership began to unravel as the Spanish became more emboldened. Cortés, sensing the vulnerability of the Aztec ruler, effectively took Moctezuma captive, holding him within his own palace in Tenochtitlan and using the emperor as a puppet leader. As the weeks passed, the Spanish began to grow increasingly hostile and ambitious. They were driven not only by the allure of gold and wealth but also by the desire for domination. The Aztec Empire, which had been so confident in its might and its gods, now found itself faced with a foe that seemed nearly invincible. The small Spanish force, armed with guns, cannons, and steel armor, was able to outmatch the Aztec warriors, despite being vastly outnumbered. The Aztec military, while powerful and feared, could not effectively contend with the Spanish weapons or their European tactics. But even more decisive was the spread of disease, which came with the Spanish. Smallpox, a disease unknown to the indigenous populations, ravaged the Aztec people. Entire communities were wiped out as the virus spread uncontrollably. The loss of life was catastrophic, severely weakening the Aztecs' ability to mount an effective defense against the Spanish. Many of the Aztec allies who had been hostile toward the empire began to turn against it as the sickness and turmoil spread. As the tension in Tenochtitlan grew, the Spanish soldiers and their indigenous allies prepared for a final confrontation. In 1520, during a festival celebrating the Aztec god Huitzilopochtli, a bloody conflict broke out between the Spanish and the Aztec people. This event, known as the Noche Triste, Night of Sorrows, was a pivotal moment in the collapse of the Aztec Empire. Cortés and his men were forced to flee Tenochtitlan in the face of overwhelming numbers, but their retreat was costly. Many Spanish soldiers were killed, and the Aztecs saw this as a great victory. However, the Aztecs' victory was short-lived. Cortés, recovering from his retreat, reassembled his forces, this time with more indigenous allies who were eager to see the downfall of the Aztecs. By 1521, Cortés and his army, now reinforced and aided by thousands of indigenous troops, laid siege to Tenochtitlan. The city, already weakened by disease and internal strife, could not hold out against the siege. In August 1521, after several months of brutal fighting, the Spanish finally breached Tenochtitlan's defenses. The Aztec Empire, once one of the most powerful in the Americas, collapsed in the face of Spanish conquest. Moctezuma II, the once-proud emperor, was killed during the conflict, though accounts of his death vary. Some say he was stoned to death by his own people, disillusioned with his failure to protect the empire, while others suggest that he died at the hands of the Spanish. With the fall of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec Empire was effectively destroyed, and Mexico became a part of the Spanish Empire. The mighty capital city of Tenochtitlan was razed, and the remnants of the Aztec civilization were buried beneath the colonial structures that would be built in their place. The once great empire that had flourished for centuries, known for its advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering, was brought to its knees by a few hundred Spanish soldiers, aided by European disease and political division among the Aztecs' enemies. The fall of the Aztec Empire and the destruction of Tenochtitlan in 1521 marked the end of an era in Mesoamerica. The Aztecs, a civilization known for its impressive achievements in architecture, science, and military power, were completely overwhelmed by a relatively small Spanish force. But despite their defeat, the legacy of the Aztec Empire continues to resonate in both historical and cultural contexts. The immediate aftermath: Spanish rule and cultural transformation. The fall of the Aztec Empire was not just the loss of a political entity, it marked the beginning of a new era of European colonization in the Americas. With the conquest of the Aztecs, Spain gained control over vast territories in the New World, and Mexico became a key part of the Spanish colonial empire. Cortés and his men established Mexico City on the ruins of Tenochtitlan, which would become the capital of New Spain. The Spanish colonization of Mexico was brutal and far-reaching. In the years following the conquest, the Spanish imposed their language, religion, and social structures on the native populations. Catholic missionaries, primarily from the Franciscan and Dominican orders, were sent to convert the indigenous peoples to Christianity. The Aztec religion, with its pantheon of gods and elaborate rituals, was suppressed and replaced by Catholic practices. In many cases, churches and colonial buildings were constructed atop Aztec temples, symbolizing the replacement of one belief system with another. The Spanish also exploited the indigenous population for labor, particularly through the encomienda system, which granted Spanish settlers the right to demand tribute and forced labor from the native peoples. The Aztec population, already weakened by disease, war, and forced labor, declined rapidly in the years following the conquest. Smallpox and other European diseases decimated the indigenous population, which had no immunity to these new illnesses. By the mid-1500s, the population of central Mexico had dropped by as much as 90%, leading to a profound demographic collapse. Despite the cultural and demographic devastation, elements of Aztec culture persisted in the region. Aztec language, particularly Nahuatl, continued to be spoken by millions of people, and many of the traditions, foods, and agricultural practices introduced by the Aztecs remained in everyday life. The rich legacy of Aztec art, astronomy, and engineering also survived through the work of Mexican scholars, who preserved much of the Aztec knowledge despite Spanish efforts to suppress indigenous cultures. The continuing influence of Aztec achievements. Although the Spanish succeeded in erasing much of the physical infrastructure of the Aztec Empire, the intellectual and cultural contributions of the Aztecs continue to influence the region today. Their advanced understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and medicine, as well as their artistic achievements, have left an indelible mark on Mexican society and beyond. One of the most notable achievements of the Aztecs was their complex calendar system. The Aztec calendar, based on both solar and ritual cycles, was remarkably accurate, allowing the Aztecs to track time with precision. This calendar system was integrated into their religious practices and governed their rituals and ceremonies. Today, the iconic image of the Aztec sun stone remains a symbol of the empire's profound understanding of astronomy. Aztec agricultural techniques also contributed to the development of modern farming practices in the Americas. The Chinampa system, or floating gardens, which the Aztecs developed to grow crops on lake surfaces, is still seen as an innovative method of sustainable farming. Though the system was adapted and altered over time, the basic principles of the Chinampa method remain in use in some parts of Mexico today. Furthermore, Aztec art and architecture, particularly their impressive pyramids, temples, and sculptures, continue to be admired. The remains of Tenochtitlan and other Aztec sites have been excavated and are now popular tourist destinations, like the Templo Mayor in Mexico City. These remnants of the Aztec world stand as a testament to the empire's rich cultural heritage, even as they are juxtaposed with the modern urban landscape that grew in their place. The myth of the Aztec Empire's end and its continuing legacy. The story of the Aztec Empire's destruction has been immortalized in both historical and cultural narratives. The dramatic tale of Moctezuma, Cortés, and the fall of Tenochtitlan has become a symbol of the clash between European imperialism and indigenous cultures. It is often told as a tragedy of a mighty civilization being overwhelmed by the greed and brutality of foreign conquerors. Yet, this simplistic view overlooks the complexities of the encounter. The fall of the Aztec Empire was not merely the result of Spanish military might. It was also the result of a complex combination of internal divisions, alliances with rival groups, the impact of European diseases, and the psychological factors at play. The Tlaxcalans, a neighboring indigenous group, played a crucial role in aiding Cortés and his forces. This alliance was driven by the desire to overthrow the dominance of the Aztecs, who had long demanded tribute and sacrifice from them. This internal strife among indigenous peoples made it easier for Cortés to rally support against the Aztec Empire. The mythic nature of the Aztec Empire's end, with its devastating defeat by a small Spanish force, is part of what makes it such a powerful story. The Spanish conquest has become symbolic of the broader history of colonialism, where powerful empires from Europe sought to impose their will upon the Americas, leading to the destruction of ancient civilizations and the displacement of indigenous peoples. Yet the Aztecs did not vanish entirely. Their descendants continue to thrive in Mexico and beyond, and the resilience of their culture and traditions is evident in the indigenous populations that maintain ties to their Aztec ancestors. The rich cultural fabric of modern Mexico is interwoven with Aztec heritage, seen in the language, art, food, and customs that continue to define the nation. Reflection: the enduring spirit of the Aztec Empire. The fall of the Aztec Empire represents the triumph of European colonial powers over a great indigenous civilization, but it also symbolizes the resilience of cultures in the face of imperialism. While the Aztecs were defeated, their cultural and intellectual contributions endure to this day. Their story is not merely one of tragedy, but of enduring legacy, the legacy of a civilization that, despite its destruction, continues to influence and inspire. The Aztecs, with their remarkable achievements in agriculture, astronomy, art, and politics, left an indelible mark on the world. Their empire may have fallen, but their spirit lives on in the continued vibrancy of their descendants and in the cultural richness of modern-day Mexico. The RMS Titanic, often referred to simply as the Titanic, was once the epitome of luxury, technology, and human ambition. Built by the White Star Line and designed by the legendary shipbuilder Harland and Wolff, the Titanic was meant to be the largest and most luxurious passenger liner the world had ever seen. At the time of its launch, it was the pinnacle of modern engineering, a symbol of mankind's ability to conquer the seas. The Titanic was designed to be a floating palace, a vessel capable of ferrying the rich and famous in opulence across the Atlantic. The ship featured grand salons, an elaborate staircase, a swimming pool, Turkish baths, and a squash court, amenities never before seen on such a large scale. The Titanic's builders, led by shipyard magnate J. Bruce Ismay, intended for the ship to represent the strength and endurance of the British Empire, offering unrivaled comfort to its passengers. The Titanic was part of a larger rivalry between the White Star Line and its competitor, Cunard Line, which had launched the Mauretania and Lusitania. White Star wanted to not only outdo Cunard's offerings, but also showcase the latest innovations in maritime technology. In an era when ocean liners were the fastest and most prestigious way to travel between Europe and America, the Titanic was the crowning achievement of this race. Despite the Titanic's magnificent design and luxurious accommodations, its creators made a crucial oversight. They insisted on an overabundance of lavish features and technological innovations, but there was one area where they were overly confident: safety. The Titanic was equipped with only enough lifeboats to accommodate about half of its passengers and crew, a decision that would prove fatal in the event of an emergency. In hindsight, this was one of the most egregious oversights in the history of maritime safety. The Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage on April 10, 1912, from Southampton, England, making stops in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, now Cobb, Ireland, before heading across the Atlantic to New York City. The ship was packed with passengers, including the wealthy elite, famous personalities, and a number of immigrants seeking a new life in America. Despite its grandeur, the Titanic was about to meet its tragic fate. As the ship glided through the icy waters of the North Atlantic, no one could have foreseen that this grand vessel, thought to be unsinkable, would become the site of one of the most devastating maritime disasters in history. On the night of April 14, 1912, the Titanic was cruising at near full speed through the icy waters of the North Atlantic. The night was calm and clear, with only a slight chill in the air, but the waters were perilous. The ship, despite its size and state-of-the-art technology, was traveling in an area notorious for icebergs, and the Titanic's captain, Edward J. Smith, was attempting to break a speed record for the voyage. As the Titanic sailed through the cold waters, it was oblivious to the danger ahead. Throughout the day and into the evening, the ship had received multiple warnings from other vessels in the area about icebergs. However, these warnings were either not heeded or not communicated effectively to the bridge. The ship's officers were confident in the ship's capabilities and its unsinkable reputation. Some accounts suggest that Captain Smith, perhaps in a bid to impress passengers and rival shipping companies, may have even pushed the Titanic to travel faster than was prudent. At 11:40 p.m., disaster struck. The Titanic collided with a massive iceberg which scraped along the starboard right side of the ship. The iceberg punctured the Titanic's hull in several places below the waterline, tearing open 5 of the ship's watertight compartments. These compartments were supposed to keep the ship afloat even if 1 or 2 were breached, but the damage was catastrophic. The force of the impact caused the ship's hull to buckle, and seawater began pouring in. Thomas Andrews, the Titanic's chief designer, was on board and quickly assessed the damage. He confirmed the worst. The Titanic was sinking. The ship had been built to stay afloat with several compartments flooded, but the iceberg had caused the ship to take on water too quickly for it to stay afloat. Andrews estimated that the ship would sink in about 2 hours. As the cold water flooded the lower decks, the passengers in the third-class quarters, mostly immigrants, were among the first to feel the full brunt of the disaster. Many in the lower decks were unaware of the severity of the situation at first, as there was little communication, and the ship's crew was trying to maintain control of the situation. As the water level began to rise, chaos started to spread throughout the ship. Up on the upper decks, the wealthiest passengers were still largely unaware of the looming disaster. Many had gathered in the ship's luxurious dining rooms and lounges, unaware that their ship was doomed. It wasn't until the ship's officers began to order lifeboats to be lowered that the full scope of the disaster became clear. The Titanic's first lifeboats were lowered around 12:30 a.m., but they were only partially filled. The ship, despite being equipped with enough lifeboats for all the passengers, was ill-prepared for such an emergency. The lifeboats were designed to hold 65 people each, but many were launched with only half of their capacity filled. The crew did not want to panic the passengers, and some were unwilling to board the lifeboats, believing that the ship would be saved or that the disaster was exaggerated. At this point, the crew and passengers began to realize the severity of the situation. Panic began to set in, and the efforts to lower the lifeboats became disorganized. Many passengers, especially those in steerage, third class, were unable to reach the lifeboats in time. Barriers and locked gates kept them from accessing the upper decks, where the lifeboats were being loaded. As the ship continued to list and sink, passengers rushed toward the remaining lifeboats, fighting for space. Despite the chaos, a few lifeboats remained in relatively good order, and many passengers were rescued. However, the Titanic was sinking faster than anyone had anticipated. At 2:20 a.m., less than 2.5 hours after the collision, the Titanic broke apart and sank into the icy waters of the Atlantic. The sinking of the Titanic was one of the most harrowing maritime disasters in history. As the mighty ship disappeared beneath the waves, the lives of more than 1,500 passengers and crew were lost. In the aftermath, the world was stunned by the sheer scale of the tragedy, and the fate of the Titanic became a symbol of the dangers of hubris and the limitations of human technology in the face of nature's power. The rescue and the immediate aftermath. When the Titanic sank, only 710 people survived out of over 2,200 passengers and crew. Many of the survivors were in lifeboats, which had been launched in a hurry and often underfilled. The lifeboats, despite their importance, were not filled to capacity, and some were launched prematurely, before the ship had fully sunk. The nearby ship Carpathia, which had received distress signals from the Titanic, arrived around 4 a.m. to rescue survivors. The Carpathia's crew had to navigate through the ice-filled waters, which made the rescue operation even more difficult. Many of the survivors were in shock, frozen from the cold water of the Atlantic, which hovered just below freezing. The majority of the survivors were women and children, as the women and children first protocol had been followed on some lifeboats, though not all. The men left behind faced a grim fate, with many drowning in the icy waters or succumbing to hypothermia. In the wake of the disaster, the world was left to mourn the loss of so many lives. The Titanic disaster became a global tragedy that dominated the headlines, with survivors being treated as heroes and their testimonies coming to the forefront of the public's attention. The tragedy also prompted a series of inquiries, both in the United Kingdom and the United States, into the causes of the disaster and the failures that led to it. The inquiries, lessons and changes in maritime safety. The sinking of the Titanic led to widespread public outrage, as many believed that the disaster could have been avoided. In the aftermath, both the British Board of Trade and the U.S. Senate held inquiries to investigate the events surrounding the disaster. The main findings of these inquiries included a series of lapses in judgment, including the ship's excessive speed despite the known ice warnings, the insufficient number of lifeboats, and the lack of proper training for the crew in emergency procedures. The International Ice Patrol, a group established by the U.S. and Canadian governments, was one of the major outcomes of the inquiry. It was created to monitor iceberg activity in the North Atlantic and provide warnings to ships crossing the ocean. The Titanic tragedy also led to changes in maritime safety, including stricter regulations regarding lifeboats, life vests, and emergency drills. The Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, Convention, held in 1914, established international regulations that would shape maritime safety standards for years to come. While these reforms undoubtedly made future voyages safer, the Titanic's sinking remained a stark reminder of the unpredictability of nature and the consequences of overconfidence in human technology. It was a tragedy that would linger in the public consciousness for generations. The enduring legacy of the Titanic. The Titanic story became a modern myth, not just a tragic tale of hubris, but also a powerful symbol of the fragility of human endeavors. The disaster sparked public fascination, with countless books, films, and documentaries chronicling the ship's journey, its sinking, and its legacy. Perhaps the most famous of these is the 1997 film Titanic, directed by James Cameron, which brought the story of the ill-fated voyage to a new generation. The film's portrayal of the romance and tragedy aboard the Titanic became one of the highest-grossing films of all time and renewed interest in the historical event. The Titanic story has also continued to inspire people because it serves as a metaphor for ambition and disaster. The ship was thought to be unsinkable, a marvel of human engineering, yet it was undone by a combination of factors: the negligence of its crew, the failure of its lifeboat system, and the unpredictable forces of nature. The disaster has become a cautionary tale about the limits of human control and the dangers of overestimating technology. Today, the Titanic continues to captivate both historians and casual observers alike. In 1985, the wreckage of the Titanic was discovered on the ocean floor, over 12,000 feet below the surface. The discovery of the ship's remains, preserved in the cold depths of the Atlantic, brought new attention to the disaster and has led to numerous expeditions to explore the wreckage. The Titanic wreck site has since become a significant archaeological and cultural point of interest, offering both insight and a sense of closure to the world about the fateful voyage. The Titanic has become one of the most iconic and enduring symbols of tragedy in modern history. It represents not just the loss of life, but also the profound cultural impact that disasters can have. The ship's tragic end serves as a reminder of both the progress of human engineering and the humbling limits of our mastery over nature. Reflection: the enduring human connection to the Titanic. The legacy of the Titanic extends far beyond the events of April 1912. It is a story of human ambition, technological advancement, and the unpredictable consequences of both. The Titanic's fall reminds us that no matter how advanced our creations may seem, there is always the potential for vulnerability. The tragedy of the Titanic is also a powerful reflection of human nature, our ability to hope and dream, but also our capacity for failure, often when we least expect it. The people who boarded the Titanic, each with their own hopes and dreams, were caught in a catastrophe that changed the course of history. But the ship's story, its people, and the tragedy that unfolded on that fateful night continue to resonate today, reminding us of the delicate balance between human ingenuity and the forces beyond our control. The ancient Roman city of Pompeii, located at the foot of Mount Vesuvius in what is now modern-day Italy, was once a prosperous and vibrant center of Roman life. Founded around the 7th century BCE, Pompeii was part of a larger network of towns and cities in the Roman province of Campania, and by the 1st century CE, it had grown into a bustling metropolis known for its thriving economy, rich culture, and luxurious lifestyle. Pompeii was a city that had it all: grand villas, busy marketplaces, theaters, baths, and an active port that facilitated trade across the Mediterranean. The city was home to approximately 20,000 residents at the time of its destruction, and its citizens enjoyed the comforts of Roman urban life, including finely crafted pottery, art, and sumptuous feasts. The streets were lined with impressive buildings, and public spaces like the Forum and Amphitheater showcased the sophistication and wealth of the city. The people of Pompeii were largely engaged in agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. Olive oil and wine production were major industries, as were the crafting of pottery and the making of textiles. The city's proximity to the volcanic soil around Vesuvius made it an ideal location for farming, and its active trade routes brought wealth to its citizens. Pompeii, like many Roman cities, was known for its entertainment, particularly gladiatorial games and theatrical performances. The theater of Pompeii was one of the largest in the Roman world, capable of seating over 5,000 spectators, and it hosted performances ranging from comedies to tragedies. The city also had public baths, which were central to Roman social life, offering a place for relaxation, hygiene, and socialization. The residents of Pompeii, despite living in such a bustling and modern city, were largely unaware of the threat that lay beneath their feet. Mount Vesuvius, a towering volcano, had long been considered an active but dormant feature of the landscape. Though earthquakes and small eruptions had occurred in the past, nothing indicated the catastrophic eruption that was about to unfold. By the summer of 79 CE, the city of Pompeii was at the height of its prosperity. But within a matter of hours, everything would change. What would follow would be a catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius, one of the most infamous natural disasters in history, which would bury the city under layers of volcanic ash and pumice and leave it hidden for nearly 1,700 years. The catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius began on August 24, 79 CE, a date that would go down in history as the moment when one of the most powerful natural disasters in recorded history struck the Roman world. For the people of Pompeii, it came without warning. No one could have anticipated the terrifying events that would unfold over the next few hours. On that fateful morning, the sky was clear, and life in Pompeii appeared to be proceeding as usual. However, by early afternoon, the ground beneath the city began to tremble. Earthquakes shook the region, signaling the imminent eruption. Yet, many of the city's residents did not immediately panic. Earthquakes were not uncommon in the area, and the idea of a volcanic eruption so close to the city was not a central concern for most. Little did they know that the volcano was about to unleash its fury. The eruption of Vesuvius began with a massive explosion, sending a towering plume of ash and pumice high into the sky, rising as much as 20 miles. This volcanic cloud spread quickly over the surrounding area, darkening the sky and plunging Pompeii into an eerie twilight. The eruption continued for several hours, sending pyroclastic surges, fast-moving clouds of hot gases, and volcanic material racing down the slopes of the volcano toward the city. As the ash began to fall, it covered the city, choking the air and blanketing the buildings in thick layers of volcanic debris. The ash fall was relentless, accumulating at rates of up to 6 inches per hour. People began to panic as they realized the severity of the situation, but many were paralyzed with fear or unsure of where to go. The streets filled with ash, and residents were forced to find shelter in their homes, but there was no escaping the disaster. The eruption caused several massive pyroclastic flows, superheated clouds of gas, ash, and rock, which moved with incredible speed, reaching temperatures of over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. These flows were more lethal than the falling ash alone. The heat from these flows would have been enough to kill anyone caught in their path within seconds. They obliterated everything in their wake, turning the city's once bustling streets into a wasteland. Pompeii, which had been a city of life and vibrancy, became a place of horror and death. People who tried to flee the eruption were caught by the scorching gases and debris, suffocating or being burned alive. Those who stayed behind in their homes or tried to take shelter were also buried beneath the ash. Within a few hours, much of the city was either buried or destroyed. But it wasn't just Pompeii that was affected. The eruption sent volcanic debris and ash far beyond the city, reaching as far as Herculaneum, a town closer to the base of Vesuvius. The eruption continued for nearly 2 days, completely burying both Pompeii and Herculaneum in thick layers of ash, pumice, and volcanic material. The cities disappeared from view and from history, left entombed beneath a heavy, volcanic tomb for centuries to come. The final moments of Pompeii's inhabitants. As the eruption continued, the people of Pompeii struggled to survive in increasingly dire conditions. Some of the residents attempted to escape the city, but the vast amounts of ash and the spreading pyroclastic flows made it nearly impossible to flee. Those who tried to escape by sea were often thwarted by the dangerous conditions, with some boats being overturned or damaged by the eruption's aftermath. The survivors who managed to escape the city often fled in a panic, leaving behind family members, possessions, and the life they had known. One of the most haunting elements of Pompeii's destruction is the preserved remains of its people. When archaeologists began excavating the city in the 18th century, they discovered casts of human bodies, preserved in the volcanic ash. These casts were created when the bodies of the victims, lying in their final resting places, decomposed over time, leaving hollow spaces in the hardened ash. By filling these voids with plaster, archaeologists were able to recreate the positions of the bodies, offering a chilling glimpse of the final moments of Pompeii's inhabitants. Many of these bodies were found in various poses, some lying in the streets, others crouched in their homes, and many frozen in the moment of their death. The aftermath, rediscovery and excavation. After the eruption, Pompeii and the surrounding areas were buried under many feet of ash and volcanic rock, and the city was effectively lost to the world for centuries. The location of Pompeii remained forgotten until its rediscovery in 1599, though excavations did not begin in earnest until 1748 under the direction of Spanish engineer Roque Joaquin de Alcubierre. The first excavations revealed the outlines of a lost city, its buildings, streets, and artifacts preserved by the layers of volcanic material. As more of the city was uncovered, it became clear that Pompeii was an incredibly well-preserved snapshot of Roman life. Buildings, frescoes, mosaics, and even household objects were uncovered, offering an unprecedented glimpse into the daily lives of the Romans at the height of their empire. Pompeii has since become one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world, attracting millions of visitors each year. The excavation of Pompeii continues to yield new discoveries, including human remains, inscriptions, and objects that provide insight into Roman society, culture, and technology. The remains of the city stand as a testament to the power of nature and the fragility of human civilization. The fall of Pompeii, though a tragedy of enormous proportions, has become one of the most fascinating and poignant lessons of history. The city, which was once a thriving hub of Roman life, now stands as a monument to the unexpected nature of disasters and the fleeting nature of human achievement. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE obliterated Pompeii, but in doing so, it preserved the city in an almost miraculous way. The tragedy that claimed the lives of thousands became a time capsule of the ancient Roman world, frozen in time for centuries, providing an unparalleled opportunity to study Roman civilization. Preserving a moment in time. The excavation of Pompeii revealed a wealth of information about Roman architecture, urban planning, daily life, and the arts. Streets, buildings, and even household items were found remarkably well preserved, offering insight into the layout of a typical Roman city. The streets were lined with stepping stones, allowing pedestrians to cross the streets without getting their feet wet in the often mudded roads. Many of the buildings, including homes, shops, and public baths, were still standing or partially intact, showcasing the advanced engineering skills of the Romans. Inside these buildings, frescoes and mosaics painted vivid pictures of the lives of Pompeii's citizens. The homes of the wealthy featured lavish decorations and detailed artistic scenes, many of which depicted gods, goddesses, and mythological figures. These artworks offered a glimpse into the values and beliefs of the Roman elite. Meanwhile, more humble dwellings revealed everyday Roman life, from the tools used in food preparation to the items employed in personal grooming. Pompeii's baths, theaters, and public spaces also spoke volumes about Roman society. The city had a complex system of public baths, where Romans of all social classes would come to bathe, socialize, and relax. The amphitheater in Pompeii, one of the oldest in the Roman world, stood as a testament to the importance of entertainment in Roman culture. It hosted gladiatorial games, which were a significant aspect of Roman life, reflecting both the violence and the pageantry of Roman society. Perhaps the most haunting and poignant discoveries were the preserved remains of the city's inhabitants. The human casts created from the ashes and volcanic rock have given the world a glimpse of the final moments of Pompeii's residents. These figures, frozen in their death throes, reveal the terror and chaos that gripped the city as it was buried alive under the eruption. They serve as a powerful reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating impact of natural disasters. The lessons of Pompeii, hubris, and the power of nature. Pompeii's destruction offers several important lessons that resonate to this day. First and foremost, the fall of Pompeii underscores the unpredictability of nature and the limitations of human control. The people of Pompeii had no idea that their city was built near a dangerous volcano, and although Vesuvius had erupted before, no one expected such a catastrophic event. The eruption of Vesuvius was sudden and violent, and the inhabitants of Pompeii had little chance to escape once the volcanic activity began. The Aztecs, the Romans, and many other ancient civilizations believed in their invincibility, in the power of their achievements and their advanced technology. But just as the Aztecs learned the hard way from their encounter with the Spanish, the Romans in Pompeii were humbled by the force of nature. In the face of a natural disaster of such magnitude, even the greatest empire on earth was helpless. The second lesson that Pompeii offers is the importance of preparedness and risk awareness. Although the people of Pompeii did not know the full danger they faced, they could have been better equipped to respond to the crisis. The city's infrastructure, its buildings, streets, and society was sophisticated, yet they lacked the means to deal with the sudden and catastrophic eruption of Vesuvius. It is a reminder that even the most advanced societies can fail to anticipate dangers and plan for the worst. Finally, the story of Pompeii reminds us that the power of nature is often underestimated, and even in modern times, we remain vulnerable to the unpredictable forces of the earth. The eruption of Vesuvius and the resulting devastation to Pompeii was a precursor to many similar disasters that followed, and it continues to serve as a cautionary tale about the need for vigilance and preparedness in the face of natural hazards. The rediscovery of Pompeii, a window into the past. The rediscovery and excavation of Pompeii in the 18th century opened a window into the past that allowed us to understand Roman civilization in ways that no written records could. The city's well-preserved remains offer unique opportunity to explore how people lived, worked, and interacted in ancient times. The site has provided invaluable insights into Roman architecture, art, engineering, and social life, allowing modern scholars to reconstruct the way of life in the ancient world. Today, Pompeii is one of the most visited archaeological sites in the world, drawing millions of visitors each year. The ruins of the city continue to captivate the imagination of people around the globe, offering a poignant and lasting reminder of a civilization that once thrived, only to be swallowed up by a volcanic eruption. The legacy of Pompeii is not only a testament to Roman achievement, but also a reminder of the transitory nature of human existence. Reflection: the enduring legacy of Pompeii. Pompeii is more than just an ancient city destroyed by a volcanic eruption. It is a symbol of both the fragility of human civilization and the resilience of the human spirit. The city's ruins stand as a reminder of what was lost, but also what has been preserved, offering a snapshot of ancient life that continues to educate and inspire. The victims of Pompeii, frozen in time by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, remind us of the unpredictable and often uncontrollable forces of nature that shape our world. But in the end, the rediscovery of Pompeii also underscores the importance of preservation. What was once lost to the sands of time has now been recovered, allowing us to learn from the past and better understand the lives of those who came before us. The story of Pompeii reminds us that while we may face catastrophic events, the memory of those who came before us can live on, offering us valuable lessons and insights as we move forward in time. The Great Fire of London, which swept through the city in 1666, remains one of the most significant and devastating events in the history of England. Before the fire, London was a city of contrasts bustling with trade, political power, and culture, but also plagued by overcrowding, poor sanitation, and inadequate building materials. The city had grown rapidly in the 17th century, and by 1666, it had become a major European capital, at the heart of commerce and the British Empire. The streets of London were narrow and cramped, with buildings often constructed close together, many of them made of timber, which was highly susceptible to fire. The city's infrastructure was old, and its firefighting measures were rudimentary at best. Fires had been a frequent occurrence, but the danger posed by them was not fully realized until the summer of 1666. London was divided into multiple districts, including the City of London, the core of the city, Westminster, and other areas like Southwark. The heart of London's commercial activity was the Cheapside area, which was lined with shops, taverns, and markets. Many of the buildings in this district were timber-framed, and the lack of regulation or oversight made them extremely vulnerable to fire. In addition to its commercial vibrancy, London was also a place of political and social intrigue. It was the seat of the monarchy, with King Charles II on the throne. The royal court was known for its lavishness, and the city was home to influential figures in politics, religion, and the arts. However, despite the wealth and power of the city, much of its infrastructure was outdated and inadequate to handle the demands of a growing population. Despite the frequent fires, No one could have predicted the catastrophic blaze that would soon engulf the city. On September 2, 1666, a fire began in the baker's shop of Thomas Farriner on Pudding Lane, located near the heart of the city. The fire quickly spread, fanned by the wind, and within hours it had grown into an inferno that would consume much of London. The fire that started on Pudding Lane in the early hours of September 2, 1666, was small at first, but it quickly grew out of control. The baker, Thomas Farriner, had accidentally left his oven burning, and the fire spread rapidly to the nearby houses made of timber. The wind, which was unusually strong that day, turned the small fire into an uncontrollable blaze. The narrow, congested streets of London, combined with the close proximity of buildings, allowed the flames to spread with terrifying speed. As the fire intensified, it quickly overwhelmed the city's inadequate firefighting resources. At the time, the primary means of fighting fires were buckets of water, and the fire brigades were poorly organized and underfunded. London's firefighting force was composed of a patchwork group of volunteers who lacked coordination or proper equipment to tackle a blaze of such scale. The city's buildings, made of timber with thatched roofs, were highly flammable and provided little resistance to the flames. Within hours, the fire had spread to Cheapside, the heart of London's commercial district. Buildings that housed merchants, shops, and markets caught fire, and the blaze spread quickly to other parts of the city. As the fire burned through the night, it destroyed entire neighborhoods, and there was little anyone could do to stop it. King Charles II and his officials tried to organize the city's response, but their efforts were hindered by confusion and panic. Firefighting efforts were further complicated by the fact that many citizens were focused on saving their own property, with little concern for the larger community. Some people tried to use fire breaks demolishing houses to create barriers against the flames, but these efforts were often ineffective against the fire's unstoppable momentum. On September 3, the fire continued to rage, now threatening the Tower of London, the St. Paul's Cathedral, and other iconic structures. The fire spread westward through the city, engulfing residential areas, churches, and even parts of the royal palace. By this point, the fire had grown so large that it was impossible to stop. It seemed as though the entire city of London was on fire. The fire burned for 4 days and was only extinguished on September 6, when the wind died down and the flames lost their force. By that time, the fire had destroyed much of central London, leaving thousands of residents homeless. The damage was catastrophic, and the city was left in ruins. The scale of destruction. When the fire finally subsided, the scale of the destruction became clear. An estimated 87 churches, including the iconic St. Paul's Cathedral, were destroyed. 13,200 houses were reduced to ash, along with many of London's public buildings, including guild halls, taverns, and shops. The Royal Exchange, a key trading hub, was also among the structures lost to the fire. The fire consumed over 4/5 of the city of London, and the city's commercial and residential districts were decimated. The number of casualties was difficult to determine, but estimates suggest that between 6,000 and 8,000 people died as a result of the fire. However, the true death toll remains unclear, as many of the poor and homeless who lived in the worst-hit areas were not officially recorded. The majority of the population survived, but many were left destitute, with entire neighborhoods burned to the ground. Despite the scale of the destruction, the fire did not claim as many lives as it might have, largely due to the fact that it occurred in the early hours when many people were still asleep or able to escape. The destruction of property was devastating, but the loss of life could have been far worse had the fire broken out later in the day. In the aftermath of the Great Fire of London, the city was left in ruins. The fire had wiped out a significant portion of the capital, including residential areas, businesses, religious institutions, and even landmarks like St. Paul's Cathedral. In total, approximately 87 churches, 13,200 houses, and countless other buildings were destroyed, leaving many of London's inhabitants homeless. The commercial heart of the city, with its bustling markets and trading centers, had been completely obliterated. While the exact death toll remains uncertain, estimates suggest that several thousand people lost their lives, and thousands more were displaced. Despite the enormity of the disaster, London's recovery began almost immediately. King Charles II and his government were quick to address the crisis. The city's residents were encouraged to rebuild, but the task ahead seemed overwhelming. The streets were littered with rubble, and much of the city's infrastructure had been obliterated. The first priority was to provide shelter for the homeless and to secure food and supplies for those who had lost everything. Temporary housing was established, and food was distributed to the survivors. The role of the king and the government. One of the first actions taken by King Charles II and his advisors was the establishment of a commission to oversee the rebuilding process. The king personally took an interest in the reconstruction efforts, understanding that the future of London depended on swift and organized action. In the immediate aftermath, the Rebuilding Act of 1667 was passed, which imposed new building regulations aimed at reducing the risk of future fires. These laws required that buildings be constructed using brick or stone rather than timber, a major change for a city that had been built primarily of wood. The act also mandated wider streets and the creation of fire breaks to prevent the spread of fires in the future. These changes significantly altered the urban landscape of London, making it safer and more resilient to future disasters. Sir Christopher Wren, the famous architect, was appointed to lead the rebuilding efforts. Wren's designs for the reconstruction of St. Paul's Cathedral and many of London's churches became some of the most iconic symbols of the city's recovery. Wren's work, along with the work of other architects, led to the creation of a more modern, spacious, and fire-resistant city. The reconstruction of London was not just about rebuilding homes and businesses, it was about reimagining the city as a modern, resilient metropolis. The Great Fire, in a way, became a catalyst for London's transformation into a city of the future, one that would rise from the ashes of its past. Economic and social recovery. Beyond the physical rebuilding, London's economic recovery was another challenge. The fire had destroyed a large portion of the city's infrastructure, disrupting trade and commerce. Markets, stores, and workshops were all gone, and many businesses were forced to shut down in the wake of the disaster. The loss of so much property meant that businesses faced tremendous financial strain, and the city's economy took a major hit. However, London's position as the economic heart of England ensured that the recovery process was accelerated. Traders and merchants, many of whom had lost their goods in the fire, began to return to the city, and new businesses started to open their doors. The demand for materials to rebuild the city sparked a construction boom, providing jobs for thousands of people. The economic recovery was further supported by the restoration of public order, which allowed Londoners to get back to their daily routines. By the end of the 17th century, London was well on its way to recovery. The new regulations and the rebuilding effort created a more resilient city, and the residents' determination to rebuild what had been lost gave rise to a renewed sense of community and pride. While many challenges remained, the resilience shown by the citizens of London demonstrated the power of human determination in the face of catastrophe. The cultural impact and the changing face of London. The Great Fire of London also had a lasting impact on the culture and identity of the city. The fire not only wiped out much of the city's physical infrastructure, but also changed the way Londoners thought about their environment. The fire was a wake-up call for urban planners, architects, and city officials. It highlighted the need for fireproof building materials, better urban planning, and the importance of public safety in the city's design. Moreover, the fire left an indelible mark on London's collective consciousness. It became a symbol of both devastation and renewal, a reminder of the fragility of human endeavors, but also of the capacity for recovery and reinvention. The fire reinforced the idea that a city, even after such a profound loss, could be rebuilt and rise from its ashes stronger, better organized, and more prepared for the future. The aftermath of the fire also led to improvements in public health and safety. Before the fire, London had been plagued by issues such as overcrowding, poor sanitation, and diseases like the plague. With the rebuilding of the city, new sanitation regulations were put into place, and the expansion of public services made London a more livable place. The city's population slowly grew again as people moved back into the newly rebuilt areas. The Great Fire of London thus marked both an end and a beginning. It was the end of an era of cramped, poorly constructed neighborhoods and a turning point in urban design and public policy. But it was also the beginning of a new London, one that would rise from the ashes to become the vibrant, dynamic city that it is today. Reflection: the resilience of London. The Great Fire of London is a powerful reminder of both the fragility of human civilization and the resilience of the human spirit. The fire laid waste to much of the city, but from its destruction, London emerged stronger and more determined. The lessons learned from the fire, the need for better planning, improved safety measures, and greater community resilience, shaped the future of the city, ensuring that it would continue to thrive despite the immense challenges it faced. The recovery of London after the fire is a testament to the strength of the city's people, who refused to let a disaster define their future. In the face of unimaginable loss, they rebuilt their city, not just physically, but spiritually and economically. The Great Fire of London may have destroyed much of the city, but it also set the stage for its rebirth as one of the world's great cities. In the late 16th century, the English crown was eager to expand its influence and establish a permanent presence in the New World. Spain, the dominant colonial power in the Americas at the time, had already established vast empires in Central and South America. England sought to compete with Spain by planting colonies along the eastern coast of North America. The first attempt at English colonization in the New World came in the form of the Roanoke colony, which would soon become the site of one of the most enduring mysteries in American history. In 1584, Sir Walter Raleigh, a prominent English explorer, was granted a charter by Queen Elizabeth I to establish a colony in North America. Raleigh sponsored a series of expeditions to explore the area, with the goal of creating a permanent settlement. In 1585, he sent an expedition led by Sir Richard Grenville to the coast of North Carolina to establish the first English colony in the Americas. The area chosen for the settlement was a small island near the Roanoke Sound, which was deemed ideal for establishing a base of operations. The Roanoke colony was initially set up as a military and trade outpost, with the goal of securing England's interests in the region. The settlers included skilled laborers, craftsmen, and soldiers, but the colony struggled from the outset. Relations with the local Native American tribes were tense, and the settlers were unable to cultivate enough food or secure sufficient supplies. By 1586, after only a year in the New World, the colony was abandoned, and the remaining settlers returned to England. However, Sir Walter Raleigh's ambition to establish a permanent English presence in the Americas did not end with this initial failure. In 1587, Raleigh sponsored a second attempt at colonization, this time led by John White, an experienced artist and explorer who had previously been part of the 1585 expedition. White was tasked with leading a group of 117 men, women, and children to settle at Roanoke Island once again, with instructions to establish a lasting community. Upon their arrival in 1587, the settlers began building homes and establishing the infrastructure of a new colony. Among the group was Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, who would become a symbol of the colony's promise. But despite the fresh start, the colony faced the same challenges that had doomed the previous settlement. The lack of food, resources, and support from England, combined with increasing tensions with local Native American tribes, made survival difficult. In the fall of 1587, John White was sent back to England for supplies and reinforcements. He promised to return as soon as possible, but a combination of political turmoil and war with Spain delayed his return. When White finally returned to Roanoke in 1590, he found the colony completely abandoned. The settlement was empty, with no sign of struggle or violence. The only clue left behind was the word Croatoan carved into a tree, and the letters CRO scratched into a nearby post. What had happened to the colonists, and why had they disappeared without a trace? The disappearance of the Roanoke colony has baffled historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts for centuries. The colony's fate remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Despite numerous theories and investigations, no definitive explanation has been found. However, over the years, several possibilities have been proposed, each offering a different perspective on what may have happened to the settlers. 1. Integration with native tribes. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the Roanoke settlers, facing the hostile conditions of the New World, integrated with local Native American tribes. The clue, Croatoan, carved into a tree has been central to this theory. The word Croatoan referred to a Native American tribe that lived on an island off the coast of North Carolina, now known as Hatteras Island. It is believed that the settlers, perhaps driven by food shortages, conflict with neighboring tribes, or a desire for greater security, may have sought refuge with the Croatoan tribe. When John White arrived in 1590, he was unable to find any trace of the settlers, but it is possible that they had moved to the Croatoan island, as the carving on the tree suggested. The failure to find them could be explained by the fact that they may have been living with the Croatoans or had been assimilated into the tribe over time. Some reports from later settlers mentioned encountering individuals who appeared to be of European descent and spoke a language similar to English, which might have been descendants of the Roanoke colonists who had integrated into local tribes. While this theory has merit, it remains speculative. When White searched for the settlers in 1590, he didn't find clear evidence of a permanent settlement or the people themselves, and there is no solid documentation to confirm that the settlers moved to Croatoan Island. The absence of remains or further communication from the Roanoke colony also raises questions. 2. A forced relocation or assimilation by other tribes. Another theory suggests that the settlers were attacked or forced into relocation by rival Native American tribes. While the Croatoans were initially friendly, other tribes in the area, such as the Powhatan or the Secotans, were not as hospitable. The settlers might have been caught in intertribal conflicts, and some speculate that they could have been either killed or captured by these hostile tribes. In this scenario, it's possible that the settlers were either wiped out in a violent confrontation or enslaved, and their identities were lost over time. The evidence for this theory is largely circumstantial, though the word Croatoan could point to the Croatoan tribe. It's possible that the settlers were dispersed or attacked by multiple tribes before they could reach safety or leave any further clues. 3. The colonists attempted to return to England. Some historians believe that, after the failure of their settlement, the colonists might have tried to leave Roanoke Island and return to England. Given the fact that White had been absent for 3 years, it's possible that the settlers, faced with dwindling supplies and no hope of resupply, may have taken matters into their own hands and tried to sail back across the Atlantic. There is a theory that suggests they might have been lost at sea or perished during their journey, but no wreckage or evidence of such an attempt has ever been found. This theory is bolstered by the fact that the word Croatoan may have been a signal that the settlers were heading for the nearby island of Croatoan. It's possible that they had intended to wait there for White's return, but no attempt to reach England ever succeeded or was recorded. This theory would suggest a tragic, lost attempt to return to civilization, but like others, it remains unproven. 4. Disease, starvation, or internal conflict. Some have speculated that the colonists may have died from disease or starvation, as they were not adequately prepared for the harsh conditions of the New World. Malaria, dysentery, and other illnesses would have taken a toll on the settlers, and the lack of sufficient food and supplies likely contributed to the collapse of the settlement. It's possible that, in the absence of white, the survivors perished or were unable to rebuild. Another theory suggests that internal conflict or poor leadership might have fractured the colony. The settlers may have divided into factions, leading to discord that ultimately contributed to their downfall. Some believe that the leadership structure in the colony, especially after White's departure, was insufficient to maintain order. The lack of coordination and preparedness could have resulted in the colony's collapse. 5. The theory of a lost experiment or intentional disappearance. In a more speculative vein, some have suggested that the disappearance of the Roanoke colony was part of a larger, secretive experiment. Some have proposed that Raleigh's plan was never truly about establishing a successful colony, but was instead an experiment in human settlement, perhaps to test the conditions of the New World. This theory would imply that the colony's disappearance was planned or orchestrated to gather information on the effects of isolation or experimentation with colonial life. Alternatively, it is possible that the settlers decided to deliberately disappear in order to escape the hardships of colonial life, abandoning their identity and hopping to start anew. However, the lack of any further records or clear evidence of such a plan makes this theory highly unlikely. 6. The enduring mystery, a national enigma. Despite all the theories, the fate of the Roanoke colony remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries. The lack of clear evidence has led to numerous debates, books, documentaries, and even fictionalized accounts about what happened to the settlers. The enigmatic clue of Croatoan, carved into a tree, continues to fascinate and perplex, and while several plausible explanations exist, none have been definitively proven. Archaeological excavations continue on Roanoke Island, and new discoveries occasionally surface. In recent years, researchers have focused on the possibility that there may be undiscovered evidence of the settlers' fate buried beneath layers of history. There is still hope that one day, the mystery of what happened to the lost colony may be solved. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is one of the most famous and enduring mysteries in modern history. Stretching between the points of Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, this region in the North Atlantic Ocean has been the site of numerous unexplained disappearances of ships and aircraft over the centuries. Although the mystery surrounding the Bermuda Triangle has been the subject of intense speculation, it is often cited as an area where something as bizarre as supernatural forces, unknown phenomena, or even extraterrestrial involvement is at play. The concept of the Bermuda Triangle as a mysterious and dangerous region of the world didn't gain widespread popularity until the 20th century. While there had been earlier reports of strange disappearances and unusual events in the area, it was the publication of Vincent Gatty's 1964 book, Invisible Horizons, The Mystery of the Bermuda Triangle, that brought the region into the public spotlight. The book described a series of incidents where ships and planes seemed to vanish without explanation. Gatty's theories and compelling narrative sparked public fascination and set the stage for the Bermuda Triangle to enter the realm of popular myth. But the mystery predates Gatty's book by centuries. The earliest known disappearances in the region occurred long before the Bermuda Triangle became a sensation in the media. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, on his historic voyage to the New World, noted strange occurrences in the waters of the Caribbean, including a great light in the sky and an inexplicable compass malfunction. These reports were likely influenced by the superstitions of the time, but Columbus, Observations about the area became a part of the lore that would later shape the myth of the Bermuda Triangle. Despite its mystical reputation, the Bermuda Triangle is actually just a small area within the vast Atlantic Ocean. The region is an important trade route, and millions of ships and planes pass through it every year without incident. Nonetheless, the idea of the Bermuda Triangle as a hotspot of mysterious disappearances continues to captivate people to this day. The combination of unexplained events, media attention, and the region's difficult conditions has created a sense of eerie allure surrounding the area. The Bermuda Triangle has been the site of numerous unexplained disappearances, and while many can be attributed to natural causes or human error, the sheer frequency of incidents in the area has contributed to the region's reputation as a mysterious and dangerous place. Over the years, the Bermuda Triangle has become synonymous with unexplained phenomena, but it is important to examine the key incidents and theories that have kept the legend alive. The disappearance of Flight 19. One of the most famous and widely discussed incidents in the Bermuda Triangle is the disappearance of Flight 19, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy bombers on a training mission in December 1945. The aircraft, which were flying from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, became disoriented during a routine navigation exercise. The pilots reported that their compasses were malfunctioning, and they were unable to determine their location. As the mission progressed, the pilots' confusion grew, and the squadron became increasingly lost. The squadron leader, Lt. Charles Taylor, radioed in distress, saying that they were unable to locate land. Despite repeated attempts to reach them, the aircraft disappeared from radar, and no trace of Flight 19 or its crew was ever found. In addition to the 5 bombers, a rescue plane sent to search for the missing squadron also disappeared, bringing the total number of lost planes to 6. The mystery surrounding the disappearance of Flight 19 remains one of the most notable and enduring aspects of Bermuda Triangle lore. Theories surrounding the disappearance of Flight 19 range from human error to technical malfunctions. Some experts believe that the pilots became disoriented due to navigational errors, while others suggest that they may have fallen victim to storms or confusing weather conditions. The idea of a magnetic anomaly affecting the aircraft's instruments has also been proposed, given that the Bermuda Triangle is known for unusual magnetic disturbances. Yet, despite multiple investigations, the disappearance remains unresolved, and the loss of Flight 19 continues to fuel the myth of the Bermuda Triangle. The USS Cyclops, a vanishing ship. Another famous Bermuda Triangle incident involves the disappearance of the USS Cyclops, a U.S. Navy collier ship that vanished without a trace in March 1918. The ship was carrying over 300 men and a cargo of manganese ore from Brazil to Baltimore, Maryland. It had been reported that the Cyclops had been experiencing problems with its engine, but there were no signs of distress before it disappeared. The ship never sent a distress signal, and it was last heard from when it was about 200 miles off the coast of the United States. Despite extensive searches by the U.S. Navy, no wreckage of the Cyclops was ever found. The mystery surrounding its disappearance has led to numerous theories. Some have suggested that the ship's cargo, which was unstable and could have shifted during the journey, caused the ship to capsize. Others propose that the Cyclops encountered a storm or was the victim of a submarine attack during World War I, though no evidence supports this theory. The fact that no wreckage was ever recovered has only contributed to the sense of mystery that surrounds the incident. The USS Cyclops is considered one of the largest single-ship disappearances in history, and its fate remains an enduring enigma. Over the years, the case has become a symbol of the Bermuda Triangle's alleged power to cause the unexplained disappearance of vessels. Theories about the Bermuda Triangle. The disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle have led to numerous theories, some scientific and others more speculative. These theories attempt to explain the high number of incidents in the area, though none have provided a definitive answer. Here are some of the most widely discussed theories. 1. Magnetic anomalies and instrument malfunctions. One of the most widely cited theories for the mysterious disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is that magnetic anomalies in the area cause instruments, such as compasses and navigation equipment, to malfunction. The Bermuda Triangle is located along the magnetic declination line, where the Earth's magnetic field is unusually strong and inconsistent. Some scientists suggest that these magnetic disturbances can interfere with a ship's or aircraft's navigational systems, causing them to become disoriented and potentially lost. The theory of magnetic anomalies is appealing because it offers a scientific explanation for the confusion and disorientation experienced by many pilots and sailors in the Bermuda Triangle. However, there is no conclusive evidence that the area experiences unusual magnetic fields, and many modern aircraft and ships are equipped with advanced technology that can compensate for any minor magnetic interference. 2. Underwater methane gas eruptions. Another theory posits that the Bermuda Triangle is the site of underwater methane hydrate deposits, which are unstable and can release large quantities of gas into the water. This theory suggests that when these methane bubbles rise to the surface, they could lower the density of the water, causing ships to sink quickly. If the methane eruption were large enough, it might even affect aircraft flying overhead by causing turbulence or disorientation. This theory was first proposed in the 1980s and has gained some traction, though it remains speculative. Despite the intriguing possibility of underwater methane eruptions, there is limited evidence to suggest that this is a frequent or widespread occurrence in the Bermuda Triangle. Additionally, many of the incidents in the area involve aircraft, which would not be affected by such an event in the same way that ships would. 3. Weather phenomena, hurricanes and waterspouts. The Bermuda Triangle is located in a region that is prone to violent weather, including hurricanes, tropical storms, and waterspouts. Some experts believe that these weather events may explain many of the disappearances in the area. Waterspouts, which are tornadoes over water, can be extremely dangerous and can cause severe turbulence, even to large ships and aircraft. Hurricanes are also common in the region, particularly during the Atlantic hurricane season. Strong winds, heavy rain, and sudden changes in pressure can create chaotic conditions, leading to navigational challenges and the loss of ships and planes. Many of the Bermuda Triangle's incidents occurred during or near hurricane season, which makes this theory plausible, though it does not explain every disappearance. 4. Alien or extraterrestrial involvement. One of the more fantastical theories is that the Bermuda Triangle is a hotspot for extraterrestrial activity. According to this theory, UFOs or other alien entities are responsible for the mysterious disappearances of ships and aircraft. Proponents of this idea point to strange lights or unexplainable phenomena observed by witnesses in the area as evidence of extraterrestrial involvement. The theory has been popularized by books, movies, and TV shows, but there is no scientific evidence to support the claim that aliens are responsible for the events in the Bermuda Triangle. This theory, while sensational, remains speculative and lacks any concrete evidence. Most scientists dismiss it as part of the broader mythology surrounding the Bermuda Triangle, rather than a legitimate explanation for the disappearances. 5. Human error and mismanagement. Finally, many experts argue that the incidents in the Bermuda Triangle can be explained by human error, navigational mistakes, and poor decision-making. The area is busy with maritime traffic, and many accidents in the Bermuda Triangle can likely be attributed to the challenges of navigating through the region. Pilots and captains may have become disoriented or failed to properly assess weather conditions, leading to accidents. While human error is certainly a factor in many cases, it does not fully explain the larger pattern of disappearances, especially when combined with the other theories discussed. The Bermuda Triangle has captured the public's imagination for over a century. Despite the many theories, both scientific and speculative, surrounding the area, the mystery remains unsolved, and the region continues to be a focal point for both serious inquiry and popular mythology. The mystery of the Bermuda Triangle endures, and its place in history has been cemented through books, documentaries, and films, which keep the legend alive in the minds of both believers and skeptics alike. The impact of popular culture. The Bermuda Triangle's mystique was significantly fueled by popular culture in the mid-20th century. Books such as Vincent Gatti's Invisible Horizons, The Mystery of the Bermuda Triangle, 1964, and Charles Berlitz's The Bermuda Triangle, 1974, brought the region to the forefront of public attention. Berlitz's book, in particular, became a sensation and was credited with popularizing the myth of the Bermuda Triangle as a place of unexplained disappearances and supernatural phenomena. Berlitz's vivid descriptions and compelling narrative style helped to reinforce the idea of an otherworldly force at work in the region. The media took the bait, and over the following decades, the Bermuda Triangle became a fixture of both sensational news stories and fictional portrayals. Television programs, movies, and documentaries continued to explore the mystery, amplifying its mysterious allure. The Bermuda Triangle entered popular culture as the setting for movies like The Bermuda Triangle, 1978, and The Triangle, 2001, as well as various documentaries and TV series episodes that focused on paranormal theories, extraterrestrial activity, and military secrets. The media and entertainment industries created an image of the Bermuda Triangle as a vast, dangerous expanse where time itself seemed to bend and vanish, and this portrayal only reinforced the growing sense of myth around it. While these sensationalized portrayals often lacked scientific rigor, they continued to build the Bermuda Triangle's reputation as an enigmatic and supernatural zone. The result was a fusion of reality and myth, with many people considering the Bermuda Triangle an area of unknown forces, from alien activity to the wrath of the gods. Skepticism and rational explanations. Despite the widespread fascination with the Bermuda Triangle, many scientists and experts argue that there is no mystery at all. They suggest that most of the disappearances attributed to the Bermuda Triangle can be explained by natural phenomena, navigational errors, and human error. For example, the area is known for having some of the most volatile and unpredictable weather in the world, including violent storms, hurricanes, and waterspouts. The combination of strong winds, shifting currents, and the dense tropical climate can create hazardous conditions for ships and aircraft, which could easily explain many of the incidents. Moreover, the Bermuda Triangle is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. With such heavy traffic, it is not surprising that accidents, breakdowns, and disappearances occur. The number of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is actually quite consistent with other heavily traveled regions around the world. In fact, many of the alleged disappearances have been shown to be exaggerated or even misreported. For example, Flight 19, which is often cited as one of the most dramatic and mysterious Bermuda Triangle incidents, may have been caused by a navigational mistake rather than anything supernatural. The pilots of the flight were inexperienced in the area, and their disorientation in the thick clouds could have caused them to fly off course, eventually leading to fuel exhaustion and the crash. In the case of the USS Cyclops, the most significant loss of life in the Bermuda Triangle, experts believe that the ship's cargo manganese ore was unstable and shifted during the voyage, causing the ship to capsize. The fact that some of these incidents have been shown to be misattributed to the Bermuda Triangle also contributes to the skepticism surrounding the area. While the myth persists, many experts argue that there is no evidence to support the idea of an unusual or paranormal force at play. Ongoing investigations and the search for answers. Despite skepticism, the Bermuda Triangle continues to be an area of interest for researchers, both serious and casual. Some scientists continue to study the area, seeking to understand whether there are any environmental or geological factors that could account for the supposed phenomena. Magnetic anomalies, methane gas emissions, and unusual weather patterns are all subjects of ongoing research. However, no conclusive scientific evidence has ever supported the idea of a supernatural cause for the disappearances. In recent years, the region has attracted attention from scientists seeking to better understand the effects of underwater methane hydrate releases. Some researchers speculate that these gas bubbles could cause ships to sink by reducing water density or disturbing navigational systems, which could explain certain shipwrecks in the region. While this theory is interesting, it does not fully account for the many disappearances involving aircraft. Another line of research focuses on magnetic anomalies in the Bermuda Triangle, with some scientists suggesting that localized disturbances in Earth's magnetic field might interfere with the navigational instruments of ships and aircraft. While this theory has some merit, it remains speculative, and no consistent patterns of magnetic anomalies have been proven to cause accidents in the region. Despite these theories, the question of whether the Bermuda Triangle is truly a mysterious place remains unresolved. The stories of inexplicable disappearances continue to attract attention, but most experts agree that the real mystery lies in how human imagination and the power of myth have transformed the region into a place of legend. The enduring allure of the Bermuda Triangle. Despite the rational explanations offered by scientists, the Bermuda Triangle remains one of the most compelling and enduring mysteries of our time. The combination of disappearances, legends, and unexplained phenomena continues to spark intrigue and fascination. The Bermuda Triangle represents the tension between the known and the unknown, the line between fact and myth. Its mystique is a reminder of how easily a place can be shaped by stories and imagination. The Bermuda Triangle has come to symbolize the mystery of the sea itself, where the forces of nature remain both awe-inspiring and unpredictable. It is a region where the boundaries between reality and fiction often blur, and where the stories of the past continue to fuel our curiosity. As long as there are unanswered questions, the Bermuda Triangle will continue to capture the imaginations of people around the world, keeping its place as one of the most iconic mysteries in modern history. Gaius Julius Caesar, a name synonymous with power, ambition, and the end of the Roman Republic, was one of history's most transformative figures. Born into the patrician Julii family in 100 BCE, Caesar's early life did not promise the kind of extraordinary achievements that would eventually make him one of the most famous leaders in history. However, his relentless pursuit of power and ability to navigate the complexities of Roman politics propelled him to the heights of influence. Caesar's rise to power was marked by a combination of political savvy, military brilliance, and alliances with key figures in Roman society. He was a skilled orator and a master manipulator, capable of winning the loyalty of the people through his populist policies. At the same time, he was an ambitious military leader, seeking glory and territory through conquest. By 60 BCE, Caesar had formed a political alliance known as the First Triumvirate with two of Rome's most powerful figures, Pompey the Great, a celebrated general, and Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome. This informal political alliance helped Caesar secure the consulship, the highest office in Rome, in 59 BCE, marking the beginning of his dominance in Roman politics. After his consulship, Caesar sought military command in the Gaul, modern-day France, as a means of gaining further power and wealth. Caesar's conquest of Gaul, which lasted from 58 BCE to 50 BCE, was one of the most successful military campaigns in history. His legions crushed the Celtic tribes, expanding Roman territory to the English Channel and even across the Rhine River into Germania. Caesar's victory not only made him immensely popular among the Roman people, but also brought him the loyalty of his soldiers. By the time he returned to Rome in 50 BCE, he was one of the most powerful figures in the Roman world, rivaling the authority of both Pompey and Crassus. But Caesar's increasing power and influence began to alarm the Roman Senate, which had traditionally been dominated by the aristocratic Optimates, a conservative faction that opposed Caesar's populist policies. Tensions between Caesar and the Senate, particularly Pompey, began to escalate. Pompey, once an ally, had grown increasingly wary of Caesar's ambition and influence. As Caesar's popularity grew, so did the fear of those who saw him as a threat to the Republic's traditional system of checks and balances. In 49 BCE, the Senate, fearing Caesar's rise, ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome. Instead, Caesar made a dramatic move that would forever alter the course of Roman history. He crossed the Rubicon River with his army, defying the Senate's orders and declaring war on Rome. This bold act marked the beginning of Caesar's civil war and set in motion a series of events that would eventually lead to his assassination. The crossing of the Rubicon River in 49 BCE was a fateful moment in Roman history. By bringing his army into Italy, Julius Caesar essentially declared war on the Roman Senate and his former ally Pompey the Great. The phrase, crossing the Rubicon, has since become synonymous with making an irreversible decision, and for Caesar, this action irrevocably changed the political landscape of Rome. The Civil War, Caesar vs. Pompey. Once Caesar crossed the Rubicon, there was no turning back. He had effectively thrown down the gauntlet to Pompey and the Senate, signaling that he would fight for control of Rome. Pompey, who had previously been one of the most powerful generals in Rome, was caught off guard by Caesar's bold move. He quickly gathered his forces and fled to the eastern provinces, hoping to rally support from the Senate and Rome's allies. Caesar, however, was a master strategist. He rapidly moved through Italy, gathering support from the common people and even some key military commanders. His army, which was fiercely loyal to him after his successful campaigns in Gaul, proved to be formidable in battle. Within a few months, Caesar had secured control of Rome and its surrounding territories, forcing Pompey to flee further east. The civil war raged on for several years, with battles fought in various regions of the Roman Empire. Pompey's forces were eventually defeated by Caesar's superior tactics. In 48 BCE, the two sides met at the Battle of Pharsalus in modern-day Greece. It was a decisive confrontation, with Caesar's forces emerging victorious, despite being outnumbered. Pompey, now a defeated general, fled to Egypt, seeking refuge with the Egyptian king Ptolemy XIII. However, Pompey was betrayed in Egypt. When he arrived at the Egyptian coast in 48 BCE, he was assassinated by the orders of Ptolemy XIII, who hoped to gain favor with Caesar by eliminating Pompey, Caesar's former ally. Pompey's murder, though politically convenient for Caesar, would forever tarnish the relationship between Caesar and Egypt, setting the stage for future complications in the region. With Pompey's death, Caesar was left as the undisputed ruler of Rome. He had effectively become the dictator of Rome, consolidating power in his hands. Though he was officially made dictator for life in 44 BCE, Caesar's authority was still questioned by some senators and aristocrats, who feared that he intended to overthrow the Republic and make himself king. Caesar's reforms and the Senate's response. Once in power, Caesar enacted a series of sweeping reforms aimed at centralizing control and stabilizing the Roman state. He initiated land reforms, distributed grain to the poor, and reorganized the calendar, creating the Julian calendar, which laid the foundation for the calendar we use today. Caesar also reduced debt, reformed the Senate, and created public works projects, providing employment to many of Rome's poorest citizens. However, while many Romans benefited from Caesar's reforms, the changes were not universally popular. The Senate, which had long held the power to govern, saw Caesar's accumulation of power as a direct threat to the Roman Republic. Caesar's opponents began to conspire against him, believing that his reign would lead to the end of Rome's traditional political structures. They feared that his ambition would eventually result in the establishment of a monarchy, something the Romans had fought to avoid since the fall of their monarchy centuries earlier. As Caesar became more powerful, his opponents in the Senate grew bolder. In early 44 BCE, a group of more than 60 senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, began to plot his assassination. Brutus, in particular, was seen as an intriguing figure in the conspiracy. He was the son of Caesar's mistress, Servilia, and was thought by some to be Caesar's illegitimate son. His personal connection to Caesar complicated the conspiracy, as many believed that his assassination would be a moral act to restore the Republic. The day of March 15, 44 BCE, has since become known as the Ides of March, and it marks one of the most pivotal moments in Roman history, the assassination of Julius Caesar. After a decade of unprecedented power and reform, Caesar's rule came to a violent and shocking end at the hands of those he had trusted. The conspiracy and the assassination. Caesar's growing power had alienated many within the Roman Senate. Although his reforms were popular with the common people and his soldiers, the Senate saw him as a threat to their own power and the traditions of the Roman Republic. The growing sentiment was that Caesar's rule would eventually lead to the downfall of the Senate and the establishment of a monarchy, something that was anathema to the values of the Republic. Caesar's decision to take the title of Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life, in February 44 BCE only fueled this belief, making the conspirators believe that drastic action was needed. The conspiracy against Caesar was led by Brutus and Cassius, who both harbored deep reservations about Caesar's ambitions. Brutus, despite his personal connection to Caesar, had been convinced by the conspirators that Caesar's power was becoming too dangerous for the Roman state. He was a man torn between his loyalty to Caesar and his belief in the Republic. Cassius, on the other hand, had long opposed Caesar's concentration of power and saw the assassination as a necessary act to save Rome from dictatorship. The plot to kill Caesar had been in motion for weeks. The conspirators, which included prominent senators and former allies of Caesar, planned to strike when Caesar entered the Senate on the Ides of March. The Senate meeting on that day was to be held in the Theater of Pompey, and Caesar's usual entourage was told to stay behind for security reasons. However, some senators, including Decimus Brutus, a trusted friend of Caesar, urged him to attend the Senate that day, knowing full well that it would be his last. As Caesar entered the Senate chamber, the conspirators surrounded him. Initially, they approached him with petitions, but then they closed in, drawing hidden daggers. According to historical accounts, Tullius Cimber, one of the conspirators, was the first to attack Caesar, pulling his toga over his head as a signal for the others to strike. Casca, one of the conspirators, delivered the first blow to Caesar's neck, but it was Brutus who dealt the final, fatal blow. As Caesar saw Brutus among his attackers, the famous words "Et tu, Brute," and "You, Brutus," are said to have escaped his lips, signaling his shock and betrayal. Caesar was stabbed 23 times, and his lifeless body collapsed on the Senate floor. The assassination, though well coordinated, was not without its chaos, and it immediately threw Rome into a state of uncertainty. The immediate aftermath. Caesar's death sent shockwaves through Rome. The conspirators, believing they had liberated Rome from a would-be tyrant, had no clear plan for the future. The assassination of a leader as powerful as Caesar created a power vacuum that no one was prepared for. The conspirators expected the Senate and the people of Rome to rally around them and restore the Republic, but they were sorely mistaken. Instead, Caesar's loyalists, led by Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, and Octavian, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir, moved quickly to fill the power gap. Antony, who had been serving as consul at the time of the assassination, used his political acumen to manipulate the situation in his favor. The Senate, meanwhile, was divided. While some senators supported the conspirators, others saw the political chaos as an opportunity to pursue their own ambitions. In the days following Caesar's death, Antony sought to secure his own position and consolidate power, using his influence with the army and his connection to the people. Meanwhile, Octavian, who had been in Illyricum at the time of the assassination, returned to Rome to claim his inheritance as Caesar's adopted son. Though initially a relatively unknown figure, Octavian's charisma and ambition quickly earned him the loyalty of Caesar's veterans, and he would soon be a central figure in Roman politics. The death of Caesar also ignited a powerful political struggle for control of the Roman world. In a dramatic show of political maneuvering, Antony and Octavian initially allied with each other, forming the Second Triumvirate in 43 BCE alongside Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. This alliance was solidified through their combined military strength and the power of their political positions. However, the Second Triumvirate was not without its own tensions. Antony, who had hoped to be the sole heir to Caesar's legacy, quickly found himself at odds with Octavian, who was determined to secure his own power. This rivalry would eventually erupt into open conflict, leading to the famous Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, which would mark the final defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, securing Octavian's rise as the first Roman emperor, Augustus. The end of the Roman Republic and the rise of empire. Caesar's assassination ultimately did not restore the Roman Republic. Instead, it set in motion the end of the Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. The chaos that followed Caesar's death and the failure of the Senate to reclaim power demonstrated the inability of the Roman Republic's political system to adapt to the demands of the empire's size and complexity. While the conspirators had hoped to restore the power of the Senate, they had underestimated the support Caesar had among the people and the military. Caesar had been a populist leader, and his death created a power vacuum that could only be filled by someone with the political acumen and military backing to consolidate power. That figure would ultimately be Octavian, who, through skillful political maneuvering, would become the first emperor of Rome, marking the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. In 27 BCE, Octavian formally assumed the title Augustus and became the first Roman emperor. The Republic, which had once governed Rome for over 500 years, was no more. Augustus' reign would bring about a period of relative peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, but it was also the end of a system that had been the cornerstone of Roman governance for centuries. Reflection: the legacy of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar's assassination is one of the most significant events in the history of Rome, marking the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Caesar's death was a tragic and violent moment, but it was also a turning point that reshaped the future of the Roman world. Despite the conspirators' intent to restore the Republic, the political instability and infighting that followed his assassination only proved that the Republic could no longer function in the way it had before. Caesar's legacy, though complicated by his dictatorial rule, is undeniable. His military conquests expanded the Roman Empire, and his reforms laid the groundwork for future emperors. His name would become synonymous with power, ambition, and political genius. The Ides of March, while marking his death, also marked the irreversible shift from republic to empire. The events surrounding Caesar's assassination continue to be studied and debated, but the profound impact of his life and death remains a cornerstone of both Roman history and world history as a whole. The city of Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, has stood as a beacon of history for over a millennium. Founded by the Roman Emperor Constantine in 330 CE, the city was initially named Byzantium, but Constantine renamed it after himself, making it the new capital of the Roman Empire. Constantinople's strategic location, sitting at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, made it an ideal hub for trade, culture, and politics. For nearly 1,000 years, Constantinople served as the heart of the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire, which had survived the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE. The Byzantines, although inheriting much of Roman governance, military tradition, and culture, developed their own distinct identity, heavily influenced by Greek culture and Orthodox Christianity. The city became renowned for its magnificent architecture, notably the Hagia Sophia, and its great wealth derived from trade routes that connected Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Throughout the Middle Ages, Constantinople remained one of the most important and powerful cities in the world. Its walls were impenetrable, its navy unrivaled, and its culture rich in art, philosophy, and literature. The Byzantine emperors wielded immense political and religious authority, and the city became a center for Orthodox Christianity, with the Patriarch of Constantinople serving as the leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church. However, by the 15th century, the once glorious Byzantine Empire had been reduced to a shadow of its former self. Internal corruption, external threats, and the gradual encroachment of rising powers in Europe and Asia had weakened the empire. The mighty city, once an impregnable fortress, was now surrounded by enemies. The Ottoman Empire, a rising Muslim power from Anatolia, was a particular threat. In the early 1400s, the Ottomans, led by Sultan Mehmed II, began a campaign to conquer the Byzantine territories, and the fall of Constantinople seemed inevitable. What followed would be one of the most significant events in world history, the siege and ultimate conquest of Constantinople in 1453, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of a new era. By the early 15th century, the Byzantine Empire was a mere shadow of its former self. Once a dominant force in the eastern Mediterranean, it had been reduced to a small territory centered around Constantinople and a few surrounding areas. Surrounded by powerful neighbors and facing a constant threat from the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantines struggled to maintain their independence. The rise of the Ottoman Empire was one of the key factors that led to the eventual downfall of Constantinople. Founded in the late 13th century by Osman I, the Ottoman Turks had rapidly expanded, conquering much of Anatolia and the Balkans. By the time Mehmed II, also known as Mehmed the Conqueror, ascended the throne in 1444, the Ottomans were poised to deal the final blow to the Byzantine Empire. Mehmed II had grand ambitions. He sought not only to unite the Muslim world under Ottoman rule, but also to expand the Ottoman territories by capturing Constantinople. He saw the Byzantine capital as a vital strategic location, and its fall would be a significant achievement for the Ottomans. Moreover, Constantinople's control over key trade routes was seen as crucial for the Ottomans, who wanted to dominate the eastern Mediterranean and improve access to Europe and Asia. By 1453, Mehmed had amassed a powerful army, estimated at 80,000 to 100,000 men. The Byzantines, led by Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, were vastly outnumbered, with only about 7,000 defenders, including a small group of foreign mercenaries. The odds were heavily stacked against the Byzantines, but they had no choice but to fight to protect their city. The Ottomans began their siege of Constantinople on April 6, 1453. The city's walls, built over centuries by earlier emperors, were considered to be nearly impregnable, and the Byzantines had placed their hope in the strength of these fortifications. However, the Ottomans had brought with them a powerful new weapon, enormous siege cannons. These cannons, designed by the Hungarian engineer Orban, were capable of firing massive stones, some weighing over 600 pounds, and they could break through even the thickest walls. The Ottomans quickly set up their cannons and began bombarding the city's walls. For days, the city withstood the onslaught, but the defenders were unable to repair the damage fast enough, and cracks began to form in the city's defenses. Despite the desperate situation, the Byzantines held on, hoping for a miracle. Constantine XI, who had already made numerous desperate pleas to the West for military assistance, knew that without external help, the city would eventually fall. Unfortunately for the Byzantines, help never came. Papal calls for assistance were ignored by European powers, most of whom were too preoccupied with their own political struggles. Only a few Western European volunteers, including a contingent of Venetian and Genoese mercenaries, answered the call to fight for Constantinople, but their forces were far too small to change the course of the siege. As the weeks wore on, the Ottomans continued to press the siege. They had built massive walls of their own to surround the city and prevent any escape by sea. The Golden Horn, the natural harbor of Constantinople, was blocked by a chain, but the Ottomans, under Mehmed's brilliant leadership, managed to bypass this obstacle by hauling ships over land and launching them into the harbor, effectively cutting off the city's last escape route. By May 22, 1453, the defenders were at their breaking point. The walls had been battered and the Ottomans were preparing for a final assault. The Byzantines, knowing the end was near, made one last desperate attempt to defend the city. Constantine XI rallied his soldiers, exhorting them to fight for their city and their faith. The defense of Constantinople, though heroic, was doomed to fail. The fall of the city. On the night of May 28, 1453, the Ottomans launched their final assault. Mehmed had ordered his forces to strike at the Imperial Gate, one of the weakest points in the city's fortifications. The Ottomans attacked with overwhelming force, and after several hours of fierce fighting, they breached the city's walls. At dawn on May 29, the Ottomans flooded into Constantinople, overwhelming the remaining defenders. Emperor Constantine XI fought valiantly until the end. According to some accounts, he removed his imperial regalia, entered the fray with his soldiers, and died fighting in the streets of his beloved city. His death marked the end of the Byzantine Empire. The Ottomans poured into the city, looting and pillaging, but Mehmed II, a pragmatist as well as a conqueror, spared many of the city's inhabitants. He allowed most of the population to live, and even permitted many of the Greek Orthodox Christians to continue practicing their religion. Constantinople was officially renamed Istanbul, and it became the capital of the Ottoman Empire, which would last until the early 20th century. The fall of the city marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, a civilization that had lasted for over 1,000 years and had preserved much of Roman law, culture, and art. The fall of Constantinople also marked the end of the medieval period and the beginning of a new era of Ottoman dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. The fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453, sent shockwaves throughout the medieval world. For centuries, the city had been the center of Byzantine civilization, a bridge between the classical Roman world and the medieval period. Its capture marked not only the end of the Byzantine Empire, but also a major turning point in world history. It shifted the balance of power in Europe, sealed the Ottoman Empire's dominance in the region, and set the stage for the Renaissance, the age of exploration, and the ultimate decline of the medieval era. The immediate aftermath, the Ottoman transformation of the city. After the conquest, Sultan Mehmed II, also known as Mehmed the Conqueror, quickly set about transforming Constantinople into the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. One of his first acts was to declare the city an imperial capital, effectively making it the heart of the Ottoman realm. In doing so, he ensured that Constantinople, later renamed Istanbul, would serve as the political, cultural, and economic center of the vast Ottoman Empire for centuries to come. Mehmed II's vision for the city was both strategic and symbolic. He sought to restore the glory of Constantinople while incorporating Ottoman and Islamic elements into its urban landscape. One of his first moves was to convert the iconic Hagia Sophia, the largest and most magnificent church in the Eastern Orthodox Christian world, into a mosque. This transformation marked the symbolic shift from Christian Byzantine rule to Ottoman Islamic control, and the Hagia Sophia would remain a mosque for almost 500 years. Mehmed also worked to repopulate the city, which had suffered from looting, destruction, and the killing of many inhabitants during the siege. He offered incentives for people from various parts of the empire to settle in the city, including Jews, Christians, and Muslims, leading to a cosmopolitan and diverse population. The city's strategic position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia made it an ideal center for trade, and the Ottomans took full advantage of its location. Despite the violence and destruction that followed the conquest, Mehmed's reign was marked by efforts to rebuild and revitalize Constantinople, transforming it into a grand Ottoman capital. He restored old Byzantine structures, built new mosques, palaces, and public buildings, and established a thriving economy based on trade and commerce. The impact on Europe, a turning point in history. The fall of Constantinople had profound consequences for Europe and the surrounding regions. For centuries, the city had been a vital cultural and religious center, home to the Eastern Orthodox Church and a beacon of classical learning. With its fall, the Byzantine Empire ceased to exist, and the Eastern Orthodox world lost its central authority. The loss of Constantinople sent shockwaves through Christendom, especially in the West, where it was seen as a significant blow to Christian dominance in the Mediterranean. In addition to the political and religious impact, the fall of Constantinople also had important economic consequences. The Ottomans now controlled key trade routes between Europe and Asia, especially the passage from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. This disruption of trade routes led to a search for new routes to the east, which ultimately contributed to the age of exploration. European powers, particularly Portugal and Spain, began exploring new sea routes to bypass Ottoman-controlled territories. This search for new trade routes eventually led to the discovery of the Americas by Christopher Columbus in 1492 and the establishment of direct sea routes to Asia, ushering in a new era of global exploration and trade. The Renaissance and the rediscovery of classical knowledge. One of the less immediately apparent but highly significant outcomes of the fall of Constantinople was the rediscovery of classical knowledge that had been preserved in the city. Many Greek scholars fled Constantinople in the wake of the Ottoman conquest, bringing with them priceless manuscripts and texts from the ancient Greek and Roman world. These refugees carried with them the works of Aristotle, Plato, Homer, and Ptolemy, which had been preserved and studied in Byzantine libraries. As these scholars settled in Italy, particularly in Florence, their influence contributed significantly to the Renaissance, a cultural movement that revived interest in classical philosophy, art, and science. The influx of Greek knowledge into Italy provided scholars like Petrarch, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Niccolò Machiavelli with the tools to launch the Renaissance, a period that would reshape European culture and thought for centuries to come. This influx of knowledge was crucial to the development of European intellectual life, and the fall of Constantinople can be seen as a catalyst for the Renaissance, even though the immediate aftermath for the Byzantines was catastrophic. The Western world, cut off from much of the ancient Greek and Roman knowledge during the Dark Ages, would find itself enriched and rejuvenated by these manuscripts, many of which had been meticulously preserved in the libraries of Constantinople. The Ottoman Empire's legacy. The conquest of Constantinople solidified the Ottoman Empire as one of the most powerful empires in history. Under Mehmed II and his successors, the Ottomans would expand their rule over much of Southeast Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, creating an empire that lasted for over 400 years. The Ottomans continued to rule Istanbul as their capital, transforming it into one of the most important cities in the world for trade, culture, and politics. The Ottoman Empire would eventually stretch across 3 continents, but it was Constantinople, Istanbul that remained the empire's beating heart. The city's influence would extend beyond military and political power, as it became a center for Islamic learning, art, and architecture. The iconic Blue Mosque, the Topkapi Palace, and the Grand Bazaar all became defining features of the city's landscape under Ottoman rule. Istanbul continued to thrive as a cultural and intellectual hub, attracting scholars, artists, and traders from all over the world. The city became a melting pot of Greek, Roman, Turkish, Persian, and Arab influences, creating a unique blend of Eastern and Western traditions that would define the region for centuries to come. The end of the Byzantine dream. The fall of Constantinople represents the end of the Byzantine Empire and the death of a civilization that had preserved much of ancient Rome's legacy. For 1,000 years, the Byzantine Empire had held the torch of Roman law, governance, and culture, and its preservation of classical knowledge had helped shape Western civilization. Yet, while the Byzantine Empire was gone, the legacy of Constantinople lived on in the city's new Ottoman rulers and in the Renaissance, which was fueled by the knowledge preserved in the libraries of the Byzantine capital. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of an era, but it also paved the way for new political, cultural, and intellectual transformations that would shape the modern world. Reflection: the fall of Constantinople's enduring legacy. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 remains one of the most significant events in world history, not only because it marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, but also because it heralded the rise of the Ottoman Empire and the beginning of a new world order. The event had far-reaching consequences, including the transformation of global trade routes, the rise of the Renaissance, and the eventual decline of medieval Europe. Constantinople's legacy as a crossroads of cultures, religions, and civilizations continues to influence the modern world. The city's transformation into Istanbul represents both the end of one civilization and the birth of another, and its rich cultural heritage remains a testament to the enduring power of history.